When I discovered the incredible truth in that car, my son's promise revealed a hidden fear. The rain drummed softly against the roof of the garage, a steady reminder of the struggle that lived within its walls. Dave wiped the grime off his hands as he gazed at the rusted engine in front of him. The air was thick with the scent of oil, and his heart ached with a familiar weight, a mix of pride and fear for his son, Jake. The idea of Jake racing toward a future filled with dreams made his chest tighten. The stakes felt impossibly high. They weren't just two mechanics anymore. Dave feared losing the only connection he had to hope and a better life. As he worked on the beat-up racer, his hands moved instinctively, but his mind raced. The car had history. It had seen triumphs and tears, much like their family. Yet as he bent down to access a panel, something caught his eye. A hidden compartment. With shaky hands he opened it and discovered a stack of yellowed documents, remnants of a past that tore through him like a whirlwind. Family land inheritance, his father's gift buried under years of neglect. A thrill surged through him, but it felt tainted, pulsing with dread. What would his father think? Would this change who they were in this town? The weight of expectations felt heavier as he faced the delicate balancing act between aspiration and integrity. Meanwhile, Jake stood outside, pacing nervously, the approaching race simmering in his veins. He could almost taste the fumes of the track and the glory that lay just beyond his reach. A racing scholarship was his ticket out, but doubt clung to him like a shadow. Would his father be disappointed if he failed? Dave's face flashed in his mind, a mixture of pride and worry that made him tremble. The pressure swelled, and Jake felt it constricting around his heart. They were just local mechanics to this town, remembered for hand-cranking engines more than chasing dreams. The thought gnawed at him. The weight of expectations threatened to crush him before the race even began. Dave couldn't shake the turmoil swirling within him. Should he hide the inheritance, clinging to their rough-and-tumble roots? Or could it be the key to changing Jake's future? The moral dilemma settled deep in his bones. The thought haunted him, filling his mind with confusing thoughts. As he clenched the documents, uncertainty began to become unbearable. Losing sight of their legacy felt like betrayal. Yet giving Jake what he needed, what he always deserved, yanked at his very soul. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with the reach. Seriously. It makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The engines revved, echoing like thunder in his ears, snapping Dave back to reality, where the moment of decision lay heavy. Jake climbed into the driver's seat, his face determined yet betrayed by the flicker of fear in his eyes. Dave could see the rival competitor lurking, fully aware of the family legacy that could unravel so easily, itching to exploit any weakness. Could their bond survive amidst secrets kept or truths revealed? As the countdown began, the stakes had never been higher. Would revealing the truth fortify their relationship or obliterate it altogether? In that moment, Dave knew he stood at a precipice. A conflict beyond mere dollars and dreams, waiting for the checkered flag to drop. The roar of the engines filled the air, a chaotic symphony that buzzed around Dave like an electric current. He stood frozen, mingling with the shadows cast by the flickering lights above, torn between the impending race and the revelations hidden in the documents crumpled in his pocket. The cacophony outside blurred into a distant hum, overshadowed by the relentless pounding of his heart. Jake sat inside the car, his young face a blend of resolve and uncertainty. There was a temptation to revisit the stack of papers, to pore over the inheritance and what it could mean for their future. Yet he felt paralyzed by the revelation that threatened to uproot everything he had known. The weight of family obligations weighed heavily in his gut, twisting it painfully. Would revealing the land somehow alter their relationship? Transform them into something they weren't ready to become? Focus, he muttered under his breath, summoning the mantra frequent in the back of his mind. He had to breathe, to find clarity amidst the chaos. Instead, doubt swirled relentlessly, taunting him with endless what-ifs. What if his father believed showing the inheritance meant abandoning their history? What if it crushed the foundation of their relationship? His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles whitening under the pressure. Inside the garage, Dave's dilemma morphed into something painful. He wanted his son to win, yes, but he didn't want to tear apart what made them who they were. The bitterness of potential loss gnawed at him, making it difficult to breathe. Shouldn't I want something more for him? The question haunted him. The engines roared back to life, jolting him from his thoughts. Dave could see the flicker of competitiveness in Jake's eyes, an echo of the spark that once ignited his own racing dreams. He had lost his chance, but could he gift that spark to Jake? Or would holding on to the past inhibit them both? His heart ached for an answer. All the while the countdown loomed ahead, raising the stakes higher than he could fathom. As the final number ticked down, Dave made a decision. He would speak to Jake after the race. Win or lose, they needed to address the truth head-on, together. This secret had no place between them. His heart raced, not just from the responsibility of impending declarations, but from the belief that a single conversation could recalibrate the trajectory of their lives. 3, 2, 1. The moment shattered as engines roared to life. Jake surged forward, their path ahead fraught with peril and promise. Watching his son launch into the fray sent an unfamiliar sting of pride and fear mingling within him. Outside, Jake entered the first turn, gritting his teeth, channeling raw energy into each shift of the wheel. The track felt like an extension of his being, unpredictable and exhilarating. He pushed harder, eager to outpace his fears, though they clung on, whispering as he tore past rivals, shadows of doubt darting in his peripheral vision. With each lap completed, he felt like a warrior fighting against the burdens of expectation. Though victory was not just about winning. It lay in the balance of familial ties and personal aspirations. He had the power, yet the ramifications of the truth weighed heavier than the speed of the track. He could feel it, pulsing at the edges of his consciousness. As he crossed each finish line, hopes flared and extinguished within him. The finish was near, yet so was the conversation he'd been dreading. With the end of the race on the horizon, a truth greater than speed beckoned to be unveiled. Would clarity bring them closer, or set them on a collision course of rival aspirations? The uncertainty loomed as Jake focused on the final stretch, oblivious to the storm brewing in the garage, where Dave awaited the inevitable revelation. Would he have the courage to share the truth that could reshape everything? The time had come to face the weight of legacy, and the decision would soon be unleashed. As the race reached its climax, Jake felt time slow. Each turn turned into a decision, a moment where his future could descend into either affirmation or abyss. He had stepped onto the track with one intention: to drive, to claim victory, to fuel his burgeoning identity as a racer. But beneath that fervor lay a brewing storm, the unyielding intersection of aspiration and expectation, conjuring murmurs of uncertainty. Each acceleration brought him closer to more than just the finish line. It carried the burden of impending revelations waiting at the garage. On the final lap, he summoned every ounce of strength, feeling the grip of the steering wheel become an extension of his focused will. Yet a nagging voice whispered doubts he desperately tried to drown out. Would winning today bring closer the acceptance he sought from his father? Or would it only deepen the chasm left by the secrets looming over them both? Meanwhile, Dave clung to the wall of the garage like it was a life raft. The chaos of roaring engines was a stark contrast to the stillness of his racing thoughts. The promise he had made to himself flickered under the weight of emotional turmoil. Was he truly prepared for the confrontation waiting for him? Suddenly, Jake's car shot past a rival, the roar of triumph crashing against his conscience. What if the very excitement of racing made them strangers in their own home? The finish line approached. Jake's heart echoed in rhythm with the revving engines around him. Victory felt tantalizingly close, the cheers resonating full of life. But thoughts of his father gnawed away at him, pressing at the depths of his consciousness. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, but even more so, he felt the weight of judgment that might come from revealing his inheritance after the race. Would the accolades mean anything if they changed who he was with the only family he had left? As he crossed the finish line in a whirlwind of adrenaline, the euphoria felt more like an aftershock than a triumph. He pulled into the pits, trying to shake off the racing thoughts that now seemed louder than the roar of fans. He unbuckled himself and stepped out of the car, sensing the applause wash over him like waves. But internally, a tidal wave of doubt drowned that joy. Dave met him with a mixture of pride and trepidation, his eyes flickering between the exhilaration of success and the dark forest of questions that waited to be navigated. "You drove like your life depended on it," he said, the words heavy with an unspoken truth. "Thanks," Jake replied, his usual bravado slipping into uncertainty. The secret folded in his pocket felt like a boulder, and he could see it mirrored in his father's eyes. "We need to talk. Just us," Dave said quietly, a sense of urgency pushing the words out. Jake's stomach tightened, understanding the weight of those words. The time had come not just to celebrate victory, but to unravel the tangled knot of everything that lay beneath their surface. As they walked away from the chaos, the tension thickened into something palpable. Jake could feel the warmth of victory begin to cool, replaced by the dread of honesty and vulnerability. A whispered truth loomed over them. Would the declaration reveal the bonds of family, or send them into an uncharted territory of confrontation? In that moment, both father and son braced themselves, the air crackling with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Jake's heart raced, not from the adrenaline of racing, but from the prospect of exposing a hidden truth that could redefine their future, darkening or brightening the trajectory of their relationship. And just as the weight of the moment began to settle, a specter of doubt pulled at Jake's mind. Could this truth, this unfamiliar territory, ultimately unravel everything he believed about himself and his father? The reckoning was near, and the question hung in the air. Were they ready to face the truth, whatever it may hold together? Jake and Dave stepped into the secluded corner of the garage, the muted sounds of celebration fading into the background, like echoes of a distant memory. Each footfall felt heavy, weighted by the unspoken words that hung between them, intertwining their lives like threads of a fragile tapestry. The air was dense, charged with anticipation and the unrelenting grip of uncertainty. "What did you want to talk about?" Jake's voice came out steadier than he felt, though the tremor of anxiety still flickered beneath the surface. He could see the internal battle raging in Dave's expression, an unreadable mix of pride and fear battling for dominance. "You know I'm proud of you, right?" Dave began, his eyes darting to the floor as if searching for the right words among the polished concrete. Yet pride wasn't what Jake craved. It was understanding. "But we can't keep pretending everything is fine, especially with the secret." Jake's breath hitched, a delayed reaction to the admission. The moment had arrived, the threshold over which they both had to leap. The acknowledgement was no longer just his burden to carry. It was now laid before them like an offering for sacrifice. "I didn't want this to be the way you found out," he said, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I thought if I could just be good enough, I could earn your approval without having to address the truth." Dave's voice softened, but there was a firmness to it that left no room for escape. "We can't run from that, Jake." The weight of those words settled around them, and Jake felt his heart constrict. He didn't want to shatter the fragile linchpin of their fragile connection, but all the years spent hiding his background bore down on his shoulders. Why had he believed that racing alone would redefine him? The truth wasn't merely a secret. It was an anchor bound to both of them. "Who am I if I'm not just your son who races?" Jake asked, the question spontaneously spilling forth as if it had been coiling inside him for far too long. "I mean, my racing is important, but is that all there is? I can't give you answers about who you should be. Only you can do that," Dave replied, brows knitting together thoughtfully. The sincerity in his gaze urged Jake to peel back the layers further, to confront what lay beneath. Here was a moment of truth, not just about the racing or the lineage, but about the very fabric of their identities. Jake shifted, discomfort grasping his insides. "But what if I'm not what you wanted? What if I can't live up to your expectations? Then we can figure that out together." The calmness in Dave's voice cut through Jake's fraying nerves. "I've spent so long focusing on my own dreams that I failed to see how they intertwined with yours. This isn't just about the race or my past. It's about what you need to feel whole." A flicker of clarity struck Jake, igniting something within him. His racing wasn't merely an act of rebellion or ambition. It was a mirror reflecting the complexities of their relationship. The idea transformed, shifting from one of desperation to one of possibility. Maybe it was time to embrace the entirety of who he was, not for his father's sake, but for his evolution. "I don't know how to get there," Jake admitted, the vulnerable admission puncturing his walls. "I'm scared of what it means for us, what it means for me." "Being scared is part of it," Dave said. "Lean into that fear. Channel it into driving and living. We both have our roads to navigate, and they won't always be smooth. But just know I'm here. Always." Inside Jake's chest, emotions collided. Relief surged, but so did fear. Their relationship stood on the precipice of either profound growth or devastating descent. The crossroads demanded more than silence. It beckoned a reckoning with the truth they had both evaded. "Do we really have a chance at this? At facing everything?" Jake asked, his heart rate spiking again. "Just as long as we're ready to drive through it together," Dave replied, a reflective determination solidifying his stance. And with that, they stood at a pivotal junction, not just in the precarious balance of their familial bond, but in the very essence of their identities. The underlying questions remained, taut and potent, waiting to be unraveled. In that enveloping silence, Jake silently vowed to let go of his fears, but doubts lingered, casting shadows over his decision. What foundational memories lay buried, ready to emerge with the revelations? The rhythm of the engines faded, but a new race was about to begin. One that involved navigating the rugged terrain of vulnerability and truth. What lay at the end of that road remained uncertain. A thrilling yet terrifying mystery, poised to transform them both. Jake stood in the dim light of the garage, his heart still racing from the weight of their conversation. The quiet hum of distant voices faded further, leaving an odd sense of isolation. Although the doorway stood wide open, it felt as confining as the walls around him. The world beyond was a cacophony of celebration, but he was entrenched in an internal battle, grappling with the revelations that had shaken the very foundation of who he was. Pressing a hand against the cold metal of the car, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, attempting to ground himself. The need for clarity began to emerge, forming a path through the fog of uncertainty. He could no longer afford to drift in ambiguity. It was time to define what racing meant to him, to bind those fiery moments on the track with the pieces of his identity that had remained hidden. His mind drifted to memories of the last race, the exhilaration surging through him as the tires screeched against the asphalt, the weightlessness in his chest when he crossed the finish line. Was it merely the thrill of competition, or something deeper? Jake realized that every turn, each overtaking maneuver, had reflected a desire for approval, not merely from his father, but from himself. As the dust settled in his mind, he began to understand that proving his worth required more than accolades. It demanded authenticity. Jake took a step back from the car, the alcohol-fueled laughter from outside serving as a reminder of the stark contrast he had with those celebrating. He yearned to integrate the parts of himself: son, racer, individual. But how? Embrace the fear. Dave's voice echoed in his mind. What if he could confront the very essence of his apprehension? Not just in racing, but in life. The potential was intoxicating. He envisioned pushing himself to test his limits, not just on the track, but also with his relationships. This was where real growth happened, amidst the flames of discomfort. His thoughts shifted sharply to the upcoming race, the one that could elevate him into the spotlight. Winning was no longer simply about securing a trophy. It was about reclaiming his narrative. He had a promise to fulfill, not to those who stood in the crowd, but to himself, to honor his truth while blazing a path ahead. He grabbed the toolbox perched on the workbench, fingers lingering over the tools that had been both means of construction and destruction. Was it foolish to think he could redefine everything? Doubt gripped him again, but this time a counterforce surged within: determination. As he began to tinker with the car, his hands moved instinctively, a welcome comfort as he thought of the race ahead. Part of him needed to connect his mental and emotional preparations with tangible actions. He was ready to put in the work, not just mechanically, but personally. The engine growled at his touch, and for the first time, it felt like it was answering back to his intent rather than defining him. Each adjustment became symbolic, a reminder that he held the right to mold his identity. He would no longer let the expectations of who he should be dictate his experience. Racing had to be about the ride, the genuine adrenaline high from living his truth, not just a quest for validation. A sudden thought jolted through him. What if I fail? He muttered to himself, dread creeping back into the folds of his resolve. But this time, he welcomed it. Failure would bring lessons, revealing strengths he had yet to uncover. He wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against the side of the car, breathing heavily as thoughts spiraled into clarity. Racing wasn't the end goal. It was the journey of discovering who he was and who he could become. The external chaos faded into silence, and within that silence, he found empowerment. Perhaps there would always be doubt, but it would be accompanied by resilience. He was shifting gears not just as a racer, but as an individual willing to embrace the tumultuous roads ahead, regardless of the destination. I may not have all the answers, Jake whispered aloud to the lifeless car, determination stealing into his veins. But I'm ready to drive. With this new resolve burgeoning, a different thought gripped him, one that startled as much as it invigorated. Would there be others? Other truths waiting to be unearthed as he raced forward? The night air seeped into the garage, whispering secrets of the unknown, promising that the true journey was just beginning. The moment felt heavy with anticipation. Was he prepared to face the truths beyond his own? Jake stepped away from the car, his heart still pulsing with a mix of anticipation and newfound resolve. Each breath was a reminder of his commitment to confront the fears and doubts that had shadowed him for so long. The garage, filled with familiar scents of oil and metal, now felt like a sanctuary rather than a cage. He closed his eyes, allowing a moment of stillness to wash over him, and when he opened them again, everything seemed clearer, sharper. The daunting prospect of the upcoming race loomed, But it no longer struck him as an insurmountable challenge. Instead, it became a canvas upon which he could paint his transformation. The thought of racing was no longer merely about the finish line. Each race was a chapter of his life where he could explore the depths of his potential. Would he race to win, or to understand himself better? He found himself staring at the intricacies of the car's engine, a complex puzzle that mirrored the turmoil in his own mind. Tools clinked softly as he gathered them with renewed purpose, feeling the cold weight of each one in his hands. As the adrenaline of impending discovery coursed through him, he realized he had the power to not only fix the car, but also to steer his own course. With meticulous care, he began removing parts, his mind whirring like the motor he was working on. Each twist of a bolt felt like uncovering his own layers, separating the clutter of self-doubt from the raw power within him. In peeling away the components, he recognized how often he had buried parts of himself, choosing to conform rather than conquer his fears. Why do I shy away from vulnerability? Jake mused, pausing momentarily. The question twisted in his gut as he tightened a bolt and recalled moments when he dodged confrontation, both on and off the track. Intimacy with others had always terrified him, making him default to isolation. He realized that vulnerability was not a weakness. It was a conduit to growth, a bridge connecting him to others. As he leaned into this thought, a wave of emotion surged within him. He had been racing through life with blinders on, focused solely on the speed of achievement rather than the journey itself. Winning was previously defined by his father's expectations, but now the notion felt hollow. It dawned on him that the satisfaction of crossing a finish line meant little without the context of personal authenticity. Jake laid down the tool and closed his eyes again, this time envisioning the faces of his team, the friends who cheered him on, and even his father whose approval had loomed larger than life. For the first time, he felt anger. Not at them, but at himself for allowing that weight to define him. It was a fire that fueled his determination to rise above those constraints. As he returned to work, his hands moved more confidently. The adjustments he made to the car now echoed metaphorical alterations within himself. He had the power to reshape and strengthen his own narrative, and the vehicle was merely a representation of that potential. He would approach the upcoming race fully aware that it wouldn't just be about speed. It would be about showing up, flaws and all. Suddenly, a sharp noise interrupted his focus, a clang from outside the garage. His heart raced again, igniting a new tension as he knew it might be a confrontation with anyone from the outside world, eager to invade his space. Was it simply curiosity, or judgment he would face? There was something exhilarating about the thought of conflict now, a challenge he felt ready to embrace. With a deep breath, Jake wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward the entrance of the garage. This was not just a threshold leading outside. It was a line between who he was and who he could become. The question lingered in his mind as he pushed the door open. Would he maintain this newfound resolve when faced with the raw truths of his past connections and relationships? The world outside waited, and as he stepped into the light, he felt the weight of those possibilities, both daunting and invigorating. The real race was so much more than a mere lap around a track. It was the unfolding of his story, and the next chapter was yet to be written. What awaited him on the other side? A life lived within the truths he was destined to discover, or perhaps the dark corners he needed to confront head-on. Jake stepped into the sunlight, the world outside the garage both bright and intimidating. Every sound felt amplified, the chatter of passers-by, the rev of engines, all a stark contrast to the solitude inside. It was a test of his resolve, this moment, to see if he truly committed to embracing the vulnerability he had uncovered within those four walls. He moved forward instinctively, fueled by determination, yet hesitant, aware that the outside world could bring both opportunities and challenges he'd long avoided. The clang that had drawn him out echoed in his mind, igniting a sense of urgency. he noticed a group of friends leaning against an old pickup truck, laughter spilling from their conversation, and a part of him wanted to join them, to reconnect, and to share the progress he felt within. But another part hesitated, screaming warnings of inadequacy and self-doubt. What if they didn't understand this new perspective he was cultivating? What if they preferred the old Jake, the one who hid behind sarcasm and a fear of closeness? Taking a deep breath, he approached them. As he neared, he heard their discussion shift toward the upcoming race. Jake felt a tightening in his stomach. The race was drawing nearer, and with it, the expectations of others. Would they see his transformation, or dismiss it as a fleeting whim? Merely an emotional moment. "Hey, Jake!" one of them called out, breaking free from the group. It was Tom, a friend since childhood whose camaraderie was once a comfortable blanket. "Glad to see you out of the garage. Ready to show those guys what you've got on the track?" In that moment, Jake faced his first real challenge. The desire to conform to the roles they had defined for him, versus the drive to express his new self, the more authentic version he had begun to cultivate. "Yeah, I've been working on the car," he replied, trying to rein in his nervousness. "But I'm racing for more than just a win this time." Tom raised an eyebrow, curiosity mixed with skepticism. "What do you mean?" Jake's palms felt clammy as doubt crept in. He could easily shift back into humor, shrugging it off, but instead, he chose the unfamiliar path of vulnerability. "I mean, it's about understanding myself more. It's not just the finish line. It's about the journey," he explained, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I've learned that racing is really reflective of what I've been avoiding in my life." The others stared back, their expressions varying from confused to intrigued. Jake held his ground, hoping their silence didn't foretell judgment. This was a pivotal moment, the kind that would either embolden him or push him back into the shadows. As the conversation continued, it hit him like a jolt. He was opening a door into new territories, not only for himself but also for them. Raindrops of curiosity twisted into favorable responses, and the dynamic began to shift. He noticed glimmers of interest in their eyes, and it dawned on him that he could take this opportunity to inspire his friends, just as much as he sought to challenge himself. But lingering beneath the surface was the knowledge that the real test was yet to come. Swiftly transitioning from a conversation about cars into personal revelations was one thing. Actually putting himself on the line in the race ahead was another challenge entirely. Something in him whispered that embracing this vulnerability would spark the change he yearned for, but the fear of failure still loomed above him. What if he faltered? Worse, what if he succeeded, and then had to stand in the light, truly seen by everyone? Before he could spiral into uncertainty, Tom broke the moment with a laugh. "Just remember, if you crash and burn, we're right there to pick up the pieces." The laughter resumed, and Jake felt weight lift, if only slightly. Yet as the laughter echoed around him, he recognized the thin veneer of acceptance could crack at any moment. This was merely the first step into the unknown. Would he find strength in vulnerability, or would the fear of exposure pull him back? The next race wouldn't just test his driving skills. It would lay bare everything he'd been working toward. And amid the laughter and camaraderie, he realized there was so much left to uncover. With the cheers ringing in his ears, Jake took a firm step forward. But what awaited him on the racetrack was fraught with questions. When the adrenaline rose and the flag dropped, would he face his fears head-on? Or would the shadows of the past threaten to drown him once more? The days leading up to the race felt both exhilarating and heavy for Jake. Each moment spent in the garage became a battle against the creeping doubts that threatened to pull him back into the familiar shell he was desperate to shed. He found himself tinkering with the car more obsessively, aligning every screw and polishing every surface until they shone like a mirror. He wasn't merely fixing a car. He was sculpting an extension of himself, an embodiment of the change he craved, but still feared. One afternoon, as he leaned against the cold metal, he glanced at his reflection in the windshield. The image staring back seemed foreign, yet oddly familiar. There was a glimmer in his eyes that hadn't been there before, something teetering between excitement and anxiety. But deep down, lurking in the shadows of his mind, he grappled with fundamental questions. Would he really be able to embrace the challenge? Or would anxiety choke him when the time came to race? On the day before the race, instead of allowing himself to bask in the anticipation, Jake chose isolation. He sat alone in the garage, the quiet hum of machinery surrounding him, comforting, yet ominous. He couldn't shake off the sense of dread simmering just beneath his determination. It was here, enveloped by silence and his racing thoughts, that he encountered the harsh reality of his vulnerability. Each thump of his heart echoed the fears he had so desperately tried to confront. What if the old Jake was lurking just beneath the surface, ready to rear its head once the pressure mounted? Closing his eyes, he endeavored to visualize the race. The roar of engines, the scent of burning rubber, the urge to accelerate and redeem himself. But with that came the memory of every race he'd run, just to avoid facing himself. Every moment of stalling when he felt too close to the edge. His heart raced, not from excitement, but from the oppressive weight of past failures that crept into his consciousness. "Come on, Jake," he muttered under his breath, clenching his fists. "You said you wanted this. You said you wanted to be different." As the sun dipped behind the horizon, illuminating the garage with a warm glow, an unexpected visitor broke the tranquil solitude. It was Tom, breezing in with his usual jovial energy. "Hey, buddy, thought you might need a pep talk before the big day." His voice rang out like a gunshot, shattering Jake's introspective haze. Jake stiffened momentarily, feeling ambushed by the confrontation. "I'm fine. Just getting things ready." "Right," Tom said skeptically, stepping closer. "The only thing you need to prepare is your mindset. You've got this. Just remember, it's not just about winning. It's about being you." Jake glanced up, suddenly feeling exposed, as if Tom could see right through him. "What if I can't do it? What if I let everyone down?" Tom leaned against the wall, arms folded as he studied Jake. "You can't control the outcome, man. You can only control how you feel and how you respond. Whatever happens, you'll be okay." His friend's words resonated deeper than Jake had anticipated, planting a seed of resolve in the fertile ground of his uncertainty. He opened his mouth to reply, but paused, the heaviness in his chest shifting to a cautious optimism. Could embracing the unknown truly lead to liberation? As they talked, laughter filled the garage. Bit by bit, the weight on Jake's shoulders lessened, but a nagging thought remained. If vulnerability was his path to transformation, then how would he hold on to that strength when the race brought every fear to the forefront? As night settled in, the energy shifted. Jake felt a decision crystallizing within him, a restless impatience to transform every doubt into fuel for the race ahead. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The race wasn't just an event to him anymore. It was a defining moment that could push him toward the life he envisioned, or regression. He sensed it was more than rubber meeting asphalt. It was a confrontation against his own psyche, a reckoning with the shadows that clung to him. But just as clarity began to pierce through his chaos, another thought struck him. What lay beyond the race? Would he find the courage to confront not just the race, but the deeper fears and insecurities embedded in him? As he pondered, the thirst for discovery ignited within him, a reminder that no matter what, the true race was with himself. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but it would also bring answers. The time was drawing near, and he would have to face the reckoning he'd been dreading. Would he race toward freedom, or retreat into the shadows once again? As dawn broke, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold, Jake felt his heart pounding beyond his usual waking rhythm. Today was not merely another day. It was the day he had long feared yet yearned for. Each tick of the clock in the garage reverberated through him like a countdown to judgment. He had spent countless nights wrestling with himself, but now it was time to confront everything he had built up in his mind. Stepping into the chilly morning air, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The car loomed in front of him, its shiny surface reflecting the first rays of sunlight. It had become a metaphor for his journey, a tangible reminder that he had the ability to define his future. As he ran his fingers over the sleek contours, he felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through him. It was invigorating, but it also stirred up the nagging doubts that clawed at him in the dark. "You can do this," he murmured, words as much for his ears as for the car that had become an extension of his identity. Yet, as he tightened the final bolt and stepped back to admire his work, the weight of his past seemed to settle over him like a heavy cloak. Each race he had run as a child echoed in his mind, a desperate sprint to escape his insecurities rather than a pursuit of passion. The hours passed swiftly, filled with preparations. Each mechanic's turn of a wrench felt like a pivotal moment, as though he were constructing the very foundation of his future self. In bursts of determination, he found himself not just tinkering mechanically but engaging mentally, asking questions about his fears. What was it that truly haunted him? Was it the potential to fail, or the fear of disappointing himself? With each passing minute, the line blurred between a simple race and a deeper personal exploration. Before he knew it, the sun climbed high, and the time to leave the garage approached. A familiar reminder echoed in his mind. Tom's belief that he would emerge from this experience transformed. Yet a different unease crept in. What if he didn't? What if this endeavor only unveiled more of what he was trying to escape? Anxiety threatened to drown out the cautious optimism that had settled in earlier. As he pulled the racing suit over his body, he found himself staring into the mirror. Reason and emotion tangled within him, creating a tempest. He remembered the laughter shared with Tom, the camaraderie that had softened his fears. He remembered that vulnerability had been a catalyst for transformation. Would he be able to harness that same energy today, or would the old Jake rear his head amidst the pressure of the moment? The drive to the racetrack felt like a blur. He could scarcely recall the turns he took, lost in thought. With every mile, the weight of anticipation grew heavier in his chest. Approaching the venue, he saw the bustling crowd, the colorful flags rustling in the wind, and the pounding music awakening something deep within him. It wasn't the race he was racing against. It was the fear of failure that had shadowed him for so long. As he stepped out of the car, a flood of reality engulfed him. Surrounded by seasoned competitors, each exuding confidence, Jake felt small, like a drop in an ocean of expertise. His heart thudded, reminding him of a truth he could no longer ignore. He was no longer racing to avoid himself. He was racing to confront the fragile confidence he'd built. Suddenly, a familiar figure stepped into his line of sight. It was Tom, giving him an encouraging thumbs up before he entered the crowd. The swell of determination surged once again, sharp and hopeful. Jake realized that perhaps the race was not merely a test of skill, but a platform for proving he was more than just a muted memory of his past. Feeling the adrenaline hit, he took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. He was inches away from the edge of everything he had worked for, yet anxiety tightened its grip. Could he summon the courage to face the track and the mirror of his past, head on? As he moved toward the starting line, he knew he was not just racing for a trophy, but for an affirmation of self-worth. The moment of truth was at hand. Would he rise to the challenge, or would the shadows of fear swallow him whole? The engines roared to life, and his heart matched that rhythm, thumping louder than the collective cacophony around him. Jake tightened the grip on the steering wheel, his mind racing with a cocktail of fear and fervor. This was it. The moment everything could change or remain just as it had always been. Would he define himself by this race, or would the fear of failure overshadow his deep-seated yearnings? Jake's heart thrummed in sync with the roaring engines around him, the stakes high and the air heavy with the weight of expectation. Each glance at the competitors lining up next to him heightened his determination. Today was not only a race, it was a declaration of his transformation, a tangible testament to the journey he had begun. Gone were the days of racing solely for validation. Today he raced for clarity, for authenticity, and ultimately, for himself. As they prepared to launch, a familiar voice broke through his tense thoughts. "Remember, it's not just about the finish, it's about finding your truth," Tom called out, his face glowing with encouragement. Encouraged by his friend's faith, Jake allowed the anxiety that had plagued him to subside, replaced by a steely resolve. "Today, I race not to escape, but to embrace," he whispered to himself, finding empowerment in that simple affirmation. The starting flag waved, and like a bullet shot from a gun, Jake surged forward. The roar of the engines became a harmonizing anthem. It filled him with purpose. Each turn on the track demanded more than just skill. It required a commitment to confront not only the winding asphalt ahead, but also the inner turmoil he had long avoided. Fear twisted like a ribbon in his chest, but with each lap, he channeled it into speed. He wasn't simply maneuvering through his opponents. He was altering the trajectory of his journey, embracing the uncertainty of who he was becoming. As the laps accumulated, Jake began to visualize racing not as a competition, but an evolution. He remembered moments inside the garage, standing on the precipice of revelation as he tinkered with the car. Adjusting, restructuring, improving. Just like the car, he was also a work in progress, melding past experiences into something magnificent. When the final lap approached, the crowd's roars faded, replaced by the rhythmic beat of his heart. He had pushed through the confinements of expectation and disappointment. He felt neither the pressure of his father's approval, nor the weight of insecurity. Instead, he felt liberated, exhilarated by the prospect of authentic success. As he crossed the finish line, the checkered flag waved above him, signifying more than just victory. It marked a profound personal achievement. The crowd erupted in applause, but Jake was lost in himself, exhilaration coursing through him like lightning. He had raced against not just rivals, but against the doubts he had internalized. Exiting the car, he was greeted by Tom's beaming face. "You did it, Jake. I knew you could." But even as the celebration erupted around him, it was the quiet resonance within that mattered most. He felt alive with possibility, no longer shackled by fear. Dave appeared a few moments later, pride radiating from him like the sun breaking through clouds. "You drove like a champion," he said, his voice steady yet filled with warmth. But more than the approval, Jake felt the shadows of uncertainty lift. In that moment, he recognized what his father saw in him wasn't just a reflection of his past success, but a recognition of his authentic self. "Dad, I've realized something," Jake began, the confession hanging between them like an uncharted territory. "It's not just about racing. It's about claiming who I am, flaws and all, and being proud of that." Dave's expression shifted, surprise melting into admiration. "That's exactly it, son. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, especially not to me." In that shared understanding, Jake felt a bond solidify, a bridge constructed from their vulnerabilities rather than expectations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing them in a golden light, Jake embraced the validation that blossomed within him. He had achieved more than just a race win. He had conquered self-doubt, claimed his narrative, and embraced a deeper connection with his father. The roar of engines faded into a soothing memory, replaced by the acknowledgement of the journey ahead. Jake stepped confidently into his new life, recognizing that even in a race, he would continue evolving, confronting fears and transforming adversities into triumphs. The road ahead remained uncertain, but he had learned an invaluable lesson. It was not merely about victory at the finish line, but the strength to face every turn. He looked down the track, unshackled by the past yet grounded in the promise of the future. This was only the beginning, and he was ready to drive forward. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.